desperately wicked. How easy for you to become self-deceived, and thereby fall into foolish fears, diverse lusts, enslaving pleasures, malice, envy, and even vengeful hatred. Salvation is by the regeneration of the Spirit, and not by the self-righteous deeds of the flesh. You are justified by faith, and fellowshipped by grace, not by fear and the self-denial of the flesh, albeit the Father's children, who have been born of the Spirit, are ever and always masters of the self, and all that pertains to the desires of the flesh. When you know that you are saved by faith, you have real peace with God, and all who follow in the way of this heavenly peace are destined to be sanctified to the eternal service of the ever-advancing sons of the eternal God. Henceforth it is not a duty, but rather your exalted privilege to cleanse yourselves from all evils of mind and body, while you seek for perfection in the love of God. Your sonship is grounded in faith, and you are to remain unmoved by fear. Your joy is born of trust in the divine word, and you shall not therefore be led to doubt the reality of the Father's love and mercy. It is the very goodness of God that leads men into true and genuine repentance. Your secret of the mastery of self is bound up with your faith in the indwelling Spirit, which ever works by love. Even this saving faith you have not of yourselves. It also is the gift of God. And if you are the children of this living faith, you are no longer the bondslaves of self, but rather the triumphant masters of yourselves, the liberated sons of God. If then, my children, you are born of the Spirit, you are forever delivered from the self-conscious bondage of a life of self-denial and watch-care over the desires of the flesh, and you are translated into the joyous kingdom of the Spirit, whence you spontaneously show forth the fruits of the Spirit in your daily lives. And the fruits of the Spirit are the essence of the highest type of enjoyable and ennobling self-control, even the heights of terrestrial mortal attainment, true self-mastery. 3. Diversion and relaxation. About this time, a state of great nervous and emotional tension developed among the apostles and their immediate disciple associates. They had hardly become accustomed to living and working together. They were experiencing increasing difficulties in maintaining harmonious relations with John's disciples. The contact with the Gentiles and the Samaritans was a great trial to these Jews, and besides all this, the recent utterances of Jesus had augmented their disturbed state of mind. Andrew was almost beside himself. He did not know what next to do, and so he went to the Master with his problems and perplexities. When Jesus had listened to the apostolic chief relate his troubles, he said, "Andrew, you cannot talk men out of their perplexities when they reach such a stage of involvement, and when so many persons with strong feelings are concerned. I cannot do what you ask of me. I will not participate in these personal social difficulties, but I will join you in the enjoyment of a 3-day period of rest and relaxation. Go to your brethren and announce that all of you are to go with me up onto Mount Sartaba, where I desire to rest for a day or 2. Now you should go to each of your 11 brethren and talk with him privately, saying, 'The Master desires that we go apart with him for a season to rest and relax. Since we all have recently experienced much vexation of spirit and stress of mind, I suggest that no mention be made of our trials and troubles while on this holiday. Can I depend upon you to cooperate with me in this matter?' In this way privately and personally approach each of your brethren." And Andrew did as the Master had instructed him. This was a marvelous occasion in the experience of each of them. They never forgot the day going up the mountain. Throughout the entire trip hardly a word was said about their troubles. Upon reaching the top of the mountain, Jesus seated them about him while he said, "My brethren, you must all learn the value of rest and the efficacy of relaxation. You must realize that the best method of solving some entangled problems is to forsake them for a time. Then, when you go back fresh from your rest or worship, you are able to attack your troubles with a clearer head and a steadier hand, not to mention a more resolute heart. Again, many times your problem is found to have shrunk in size and proportions while you have been resting your mind and body." The next day Jesus assigned to each of the 12 a topic for discussion. The whole day was devoted to reminiscences and to talking over matters not related to their religious work. They were momentarily shocked when Jesus even neglected to give thanks, verbally, when he broke bread for their noontide lunch. This was the first time they had ever observed him to neglect such formalities. When they went up the mountain, Andrew's head was full of problems. John was inordinately perplexed in his heart. James was grievously troubled in his soul. Matthew was hard-pressed for funds, inasmuch as they had been sojourning among the Gentiles. Peter was overwrought, and had recently been more temperamental than usual. Judas was suffering from a periodic attack of sensitiveness and selfishness. Simon was unusually upset in his efforts to reconcile his patriotism with the love of the brotherhood of man. Philip was more and more nonplussed by the way things were going. Nathanael had been less humorous since they had come in contact with the Gentile populations, and Thomas was in the midst of a severe season of depression. Only the twins were normal and unperturbed. All of them were exceedingly perplexed about how to get along peaceably with John's disciples. The third day, when they started down the mountain and back to their camp, a great change had come over them. They had made the important discovery that many human perplexities are in reality non-existent, that many pressing troubles are the creations of exaggerated fear and the offspring of augmented apprehension. They had learned that all such perplexities are best handled by being forsaken. By going off, they had left such problems to solve themselves. Their return from this holiday marked the beginning of a period of greatly improved relations with the followers of John. Many of the 12 really gave way to mirth when they noted the changed state of everybody's mind and observed the freedom from nervous irritability which had come to them as a result of their 3 days' vacation from the routine duties of life. There is always danger that monotony of human contact will greatly multiply perplexities and magnify difficulties. Not many of the Gentiles in the 2 Greek cities of Archelaus and Phasaelus believed in the gospel, but the 12 apostles gained a valuable experience in this their first extensive work with exclusively Gentile populations. On a Monday morning, about the middle of the month, Jesus said to Andrew, "We go into Samaria," and they set out at once for the city of Sychar, near Jacob's well. 4. The Jews and the Samaritans. For more than 600 years the Jews of Judea, and later on those of Galilee also, had been at enmity with the Samaritans. This ill feeling between the Jews and the Samaritans came about in this way. About 700 years B.C., Sargon, king of Assyria, in subduing a revolt in central Palestine, carried away and into captivity over 25,000 Jews of the northern kingdom of Israel, and installed in their place an almost equal number of the descendants of the Cuthites, Sepharvites, and Hamathites. Later on, Ashurbanipal sent still other colonies to dwell in Samaria. The religious enmity between the Jews and the Samaritans dated from the return of the former from the Babylonian captivity, when the Samaritans worked to prevent the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Later they offended the Jews by extending friendly assistance to the armies of Alexander. In return for their friendship, Alexander gave the Samaritans permission to build a temple on Mount Gerizim, where they worshipped Yahweh and their tribal gods, and offered sacrifices much after the order of the temple services at Jerusalem. At least they continued this worship up to the time of the Maccabees, when John Hyrcanus destroyed their temple on Mount Gerizim. The Apostle Philip, in his labors for the Samaritans after the death of Jesus, held many meetings on the site of this old Samaritan temple. The antagonisms between the Jews and the Samaritans were time-honored and historic. Increasingly, since the days of Alexander, they had had no dealings with each other. The 12 apostles were not averse to preaching in the Greek and other Gentile cities of the Decapolis and Syria, but it was a severe test of their loyalty to the Master when he said, "Let us go into Samaria." But in the year and more they had been with Jesus, they had developed a form of personal loyalty which transcended even their faith in his teachings and their prejudices against the Samaritans. 5. The woman of Sychar. When the Master and the 12 arrived at Jacob's well, Jesus, being weary from the journey, tarried by the well while Philip took the apostles with him to assist in bringing food and tents from Sychar, for they were disposed to stay in this vicinity for a while. Peter and the Zebedee sons would have remained with Jesus, but he requested that they go with their brethren, saying, "Have no fear for me. These Samaritans will be friendly. Only our brethren the Jews seek to harm us." And it was almost 6 o'clock on this summer's evening when Jesus sat down by the well to await the return of the apostles. The water of Jacob's well was less mineral than that from the wells of Sychar, and was therefore much valued for drinking purposes. Jesus was thirsty, but there was no way of getting water from the well. When, therefore,